At some point in life or business, there are pivotal moments. These crucial moments require a choice to either pivot, persist, or pull the plug. My guest today, Danielle Rinallo, has turned gracefully when faced with those choices. Through persistent belief and unwavering faith in following her intuition, she has found power in the pivots. I'm excited for you to hear her story, so let's get started. Welcome to the Youthful Older Yogi podcast. I'm MJ Waddell, your yogi host and founder of Share Yoga. I've been practicing, teaching, and loving yoga for over 25 years. I'm an advocate of movement, creativity, and staying healthy in mind and body after 50. And so are my guests. It's never too late to start, and there's a lot of healthy years ahead. So let's start now. Hi, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Youthful Older Yogi. I'm MJ Waddell, the creator and founder of Share Yoga, and I'm so happy you're here and listening or watching the podcast today. So today's guest is Danielle Rinallo, and Danielle has a fiery and very fearless spirit when it comes to yoga. Basically, her yoga journey started in the dance studio in 2009, and she studied and taught in Sacramento, California, and Hawaii, and now currently is based in Rochester and Syracuse, New York. She is a bi-city yogi, which we'll get to in a little bit. But today she teaches and shares her yoga and well-being in that area. And the reason I have her on is because already her yoga journey has been so full and with so many twists and turns, even before the age of 40. So she is one of our more youthful yogis that we've had on the podcast, and I'm excited to introduce you to her now. So Danielle, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me here, MJ.
You're welcome. So I'm going to start right at the top. Tell our listeners how you first found your way into yoga or how yoga found its way to you.
Ooh, I love that you said that because I feel that. I feel like yoga found its way to me.
Yeah. I don't feel like any of us actually search out yoga. I never really searched for it. I always feel like it finds you when you're ready. So tell us about that.
I felt that, yes. So as you mentioned, my yoga journey started in the dance studio. So I grew up as a competitive dancer. I know you and I have this in common. Jazz, tap, ballet, really found that dance gave me an expressional outlet. When I didn't have words to express myself, I really could express myself through the body. And then I, like so many dancers, and you've paved a way that you can dance all through your life. And I am now too. But when I was about 22, getting out of college, I moved into a corporate job. And I was walking the path, let me climb the ladder. And I really lost touch with my body, and I missed that creative outlet. And I was really depressed. I was actually what I think of as my quarter life crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So I was okay, I'm walking the path. I got the job. I went to school. I'm doing all the things. Why am I not happy? So yoga found its way to me. There was a beautiful human that I worked with that invited me to a yoga class, and it was in Sacramento, California, as you had mentioned. And I just really viscerally remember that experience, the sweat, the music, the aliveness that I felt that I had been missing in my life.
Yeah. I love that you said that your body, you were out of touch with your body. And I think that's what yoga helps us to do, is connect to our bodies, both proprioceptively and interoceptively. And everybody expresses with their body. I don't care what people say. Everyone expresses with their body. As you can see, my hands are expressing. So I love, and I know that yoga does get you in touch with your body. So I'm glad yoga found its way to you. And so you've worn many multiple hats. As you said, you were doing the things, you got the corporate job. And so can you tell our listeners what some of your in-between yoga gigs were and what you did or disliked about them?
Yeah. So I think I'll pick up. So once I found that yoga class in Sacramento, I took the bold leap to do a teacher training. And that was like a huge game changer for me. It really put a lot of words, or I guess yoga gave me the words for things that I was feeling. Like I knew there was something bigger going on in this world, right? It wasn't just this like path that I was supposed to walk that somebody else prescribed for me. So yoga became then more for me really quickly. And I took my first teacher training and I was so grateful. And then as you've alluded to, it's been a wild ride, right? Since the first teacher training at 23, now I'm 38. And it's been dynamic in the sense that I started teaching weekly classes at the studio that I, trained at and managed that studio for 4 years. And then realized, gosh, I want more freedom.
Mhm.
I want more freedom. I want to own my own thing. And I felt all this excitement, right? I was so excited to do it. And I had no fucking skills. I had no idea how to do it. I mean, I had all the dreams, but I was like, I just didn't know how. So I like fell into my next like transformative moment in my life where I moved back home. I moved in with my mama. I did the thing where I was deep in debt and I needed a reset. So I guess I'm sharing this in like the hopefulness that and I'm sure your listeners have had moments in their lives where they're like, what the fuck?
No, I have no idea what you're talking about. No.
Right. And yeah, I hear you and see you. and 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 yeah, it was such a catalyst for the next stage in my journey. It was such a catalyst for the next stage of my journey. I had to heal my mother wound. Like I had to go home and learn how to be with this woman who raised me the best that she could. God bless her. I love her. And I had to learn how to mother myself and like break away from that unhealthy dynamic. So, all that to say is, yeah, when I moved home, I was bartending
Mhm.
and I paid off all my debt. And so that was the good thing, right? Like I was like in the world, I could just leave yoga for a minute, say, I love you, yoga. You're always going to be my longest standing relationship. And I need a break from you right now. And I just need to pay my bills. And so I did it, and yeah, you say like, what's the unhealthy part of that? Well, there's a bartending lifestyle. We've talked about it a little bit. And that was a part of the learning too. Like I definitely fell into, consuming too much and unhealthy relationships. And that was another catalyst and breaking point for me. I was unhappy again.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I did the thing. I paid off my debt. I'm living with my mom. Now gotta be, there's gotta be more. Now, what's the next step? So I really feel like it's been each chapter has led to the next. And like each breaking point was really an evolution of my yoga practice and my journey. Yeah. So I mean, we I then, got my own apartment. I didn't even have a job at the time, but I did it. Like I leaped, right? Leap and the net will appear. It was like a foolish moment. And I just kept figuring it out. I've been a corporate saleswoman again. Like when I opened my yoga studio in, I think it was 2019, I was ready again to go full in on yoga, but I didn't have the skills yet. And I still was struggling with self-doubt and, like all the things that get in my way of showing up in the world. So I had to pivot again. Like it's like forever power pivoting. The power of the pivot, baby,
Yes.
is what I guess I stand for. The power of the pivot. So I did it. I was like, all right, I'm gonna suck it up and I'm gonna go back to corporate world. And it worked. It gave me a foundation. I had enough money to then continue on my journey. So I really think, if I've learned anything from all of this, I've learned a lot, but like it's okay to go back and like reground
Yes.
to
Yes.
then figure out what the next step is.
And I'm glad you shared with that. I want to say two things about it. First of all, you took the leap, so it immediately reminds me of Hanuman. You're just leaping across the moon like Hanuman. And for those of you that aren't yogis or know, the the splits is named after a monkey god named Hanuman because he
Yeah.
was fearless and he leapt across the oceans to save, I think it was his mother or one of his relatives. Anyway, fearless,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
In divine service.
correct, correct. So that reminded me of when you said you took the leap. And also, every one of us, whether you practice yoga or not, you have moments in your life where you're like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What's next? I'm in my 60s and I still say that. So it's not like it's always, I don't feel like it's a
Doesn't
search
end.
anymore. It's not a search for me anymore. It's just like I'm excited for whatever is next because I know there will be a next. And I love that you're just sharing this because we have to, during certain times, like in my life, during certain times, the only pose I did was child's pose crying. So it's like, that's what my yoga was for a while before I got
Yeah.
through a tough divorce. But that's life. And then somehow you get recharged and
Mhm.
you do the power pivot. And that's, I love that you are
I
sharing
wanted to
this.
pop in to thank you for listening to the Youthful Older Yogi. It's season 2, and I'm so excited to bring you more great guests, education, and ways for you to stay youthful in mind and body after 50. If you love the show and want to help me make it even better, please consider becoming a supporter. You get to choose how much and how often you give, and there's no commitment. And remember, I donate a portion of every dollar I receive to charity. For 2024, I've chosen UNICEF. Just click the support button in the show notes. And just as helpful is sharing the show with other youthful older yogis. Thank you again so much for listening. And now let's get back to the podcast.
So can you talk about what it felt like to open your first yoga studio? I know you said I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I had no skills. But what was the percentage of fear versus the percentage of excitement and hope and I'm going to move into this freedom? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. I would love to. So for me, it fell into my lap. It was like the next right step. And the universe was like, hey, I'm going to offer you this thing. So I was living in downtown Rochester. I had inquired about a space to lead my teacher training out of, and they didn't want to give it to me, blah, blah, blah. Years later, I had just gotten back from a 2-month deep dive in Hawaii. So like I took myself out of life to go like retreat. I came back again, didn't know what I was going to do. And I get a phone call. I get a phone call from my landlord and he says, I have 800 square foot space. I mean, MJ, it was like, again, you can't make this stuff up. It's like, and would you like it for a yoga studio? So I toured it. He had a confidence in me, which allowed me to have confidence in myself. And I did it. Like I just figured it out one step at a time. Like, all right, here's the build out. And then, oh my God, I got to create a website. We open next week. I mean, it was like crazy. Fly by the seat of your pants adventure. And I also like, I don't know, had a notebook on a tiny table and people just signed in and we just gathered. We just gathered and did yoga together. I had these dreams of being this big, successful studio and what that looked like in my mind. And what I really realized is like, gosh, that's not everyone's dream. And maybe that's not mine. That's not mine. And really what it was for me was like the first litmus test. It was just like the first version of the versions of me that are continuing to show up,
Mhm.
the versions of my business, the versions of my offerings. So I was there 3 years. Again, a lot of fear. It was a lot of excitement in the beginning, then a ton of fear in the middle. And I think what would have helped me, to be honest, would be to have support, from other entrepreneurs who are like doing the thing and know the steps to make a successful business. And so that's another aspect of what I'm passionate about offering now is like mentorship to yogis like you, like anyone who teaches that, just needs a little guidance. Like, how do you set up a podcast? How do you do the thing? Like we're doing it right now.
Just figured it out. I had a friend.
Figure it out.
I had a friend exactly. And I'm like, I just miss my yoga community, and I did a three Zoom session. It was like an experiment. And she's like, you can make that into a podcast. I'm like, how the hell am I going to do that? I barely know how to do Zoom. So, but she helped me, and now it's been over a year, and now I just love it. And so, but you said yes. That's the power of saying yes to something, even when you don't. And I tell this to a lot of younger yoga teachers, or that are afraid to, I can't teach this because I don't know how to do it. If someone said, do you know how to teach prenatal? I'm like, yes. And then you figure it out, because you had some in teacher training. I've never been pregnant. I've never had a child, but I had the training in my teacher training. And then you figure it out, and the students actually help you learn their skills. And so if you keep thinking, I'm not, or you feel like I don't have enough experience, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that. The only way you learn how to do it is if you do it. So you have to say yes. And yes, there's a lot of fear, and there's this imposter syndrome, and I'm showing up. And then it's like, oh, this is really, I'm learning so much from saying yes. And now, I have no fear of saying, if anybody says, I taught almost every type of yoga. So now, because I've been doing it for almost.
You built experience through saying yes.
That's exactly. And that's what you've done.
Yeah.
So you opened your first studio, and we always have a conversation before we do the episodes. And you told me that your first studio, you opened it right before COVID, I believe. And then you had a little bit of resistance about the name of it. And can you explain what you learned about yourself and about the business dealing with that conflict?
Yes, I am. I feel so grateful. I mean, I really do. Just like you were just talking about, how when we're showing up as teachers, we're really also learning from our students in the process. And I really felt like, my whole, teaching journey and this part of the rebranding of the studio was that co-collective learning, to open myself up to feedback, and then contemplate the feedback, and then make a thoughtful, pivot. It's another pivot. And I was reminded of, I was on my walk with my dog today, and I was reminded of a saying that Brian Kess says, which is like, don't get too attached to your beliefs, because they're going to change. And so if we can embrace that, I don't like these thoughts that I have in my mind, or these beliefs that I have that I cling so tightly to, might be the source of my suffering. And maybe if I open up to perspectives from other human beings, I can learn something. I can learn something about them. I can learn something about myself. I can learn something about this whole big collective, journey that we're on, and act in more integrity. It's the difference between intention and impact. Like, I may have had a great intention. I named my studio Pele Yoga. It was after the Hawaiian volcano goddess. I had just come back from the journey. I shared, 2 months in Hawaii. It was transformative. It's all about, destruction leading to creation. And that resonated with me, as you heard my story, right? Like, every chapter, there was a letting go, there was a destruction that gave birth to a new chapter. So again, I felt the intention was there. I had this, it felt aligned, and it was aligned. Like, I didn't make a mistake. I did that so that I could be in a position to then hear feedback. Hey, Danielle, you're a white woman from North America. What is it to take iconography from another culture and utilize it in your business? Now, I wasn't making any money on my business at that time, but they were for profit, right? And I was educated that that's a form of modern colonization. Wow, mind blown. I really just didn't know until you don't know until you know.
Right.
And I resisted, all of the resistance and all of the learning that happened in that journey. I mean, it just opened up magnificent conversations with people. And ultimately, I made the choice. Okay, you know what? I'm going to step forward in integrity. I'm going to lean on and actually appreciate the culture that I'm already borrowing from, which is Southeast Asia and Indian. Let me do a nod to the Yoga Sutras and Patanjali, who like birthed these amazing teachings for us to be with. And so the new name of the studio is, I'm sure will be posted somewhere somehow, Atha, right? Atha, ATHA. And Atha means now.
Right.
It's all those new beginnings and saying yes and like being up for the journey, and that the yoga is always here and now.
I just feel like that's why this your first name was about destruction. Your second name is more about creation and the power of now, right? Because Atta is in the first Yoga Sutra, if yogis you're listening, you know, and now begins yoga, right? And now the practice of yoga. It's now, it's there for its presence. It's all of that. So I love that you went from that name to this name. It just seems like the perfect circle, right? And so, since COVID, so much has changed for brick and mortar, which you were in, the brick and mortar prior to COVID. And in flexible yogi fashion, you pivoted, like as all yogis have had to do, even prior to yoga. There's always some type of learning, pivoting. Oh, that didn't really work for me. Let me try this. So, and now you're the owner and creator of Atta Yoga, and which allows you to teach anywhere you want. So you brought me the term by city. I think you live in Syracuse, or yes, you live in Syracuse, but your hometown is Rochester,
Right.
But you teach in both places and also online, and you now have this freedom because you've cultivated it. And so how important was it, or how difficult was it, or maybe easier the second time that you started Atta Yoga?
Yeah.
And made this pivot towards greater freedom?
Yeah, thank you. So I think I want to underscore that period that the studio was still open, but it closed due to COVID and quarantine. And so in that moment, you know, a lot of people were pivoting really quickly. Everything was moving online. I saw everybody like swimming way ahead of me in the pool or what, you know, like, and I had this moment where like, oh my God, I gotta figure it out. And then I really gave myself permission. It was really special to really embrace quarantine. And I know it was a really tough time for a lot of folks. And it was another moment of like deep contemplation for me on like figuring out what is it that I really do want. And so I guess as people are listening and they're thinking about the power of the pivot, you know, there's also the power of the pause, baby. There's power in the pause. And so I'm grateful I had that moment. And again, that's where Atta was born. And I don't know if Atta could have been born if I didn't really like turn inward and like take care of myself, you know, before I came back out into the world, if that makes sense.
It does, complete sense. There's a lot of times where I've, you know, withdrawn
Yeah.
and just, yes, and just be quiet
Yeah.
and just be still. And they always say the answers are in the stillness, which I never understood, but I understand now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of answers when you're just quiet and you're not pushing to make something happen, right? You can have ideas and you can start to cultivate them, and like, you know, just like you manifested that you wanted a yoga studio, and then, you know, your friends, your landlord said, I have an 800 square foot, right? Because you were manifesting it. And it happens, and that shit happens. It does. It's really, really, if you really manifest something and you really want something, you'll think about it, you'll take action towards it, and then something magical just might happen. And usually does. So that's wonderful. So tell us how you're managing to work and teach in two different cities, and how do they differ? Do you have different clientele in one city, or different energy or vibe in another city? How does that work?
Yes. Well, man, things are manifesting. I just want to like pause and say thank you for like having me on this podcast, because I feel like planted seeds, and I've always had a dream to like be in this sort of conversation. And just so thank you for showing up and letting me show up in
Oh,
this
you're
way.
welcome. You're welcome.
And so now, yeah, so it's cool. Rochester is just a hop, skip, and a jump down the road from me in Syracuse. So it's kind of far enough away where I get to start a new chapter in Syracuse and plant some new seeds and create a new community, while still like honoring my roots, and honoring that Rochester held me for a really long time. And that's also where, yeah, I had my studio and knew a lot of folks. So I I appreciate that I get to stay connected to my roots while also growing
Yeah.
and branching out. That's how I feel about it.
Awesome. And so you are branching out. You're involved with
Yeah.
multiple projects, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But first, I want to ask you, because I've created some workshops and still do. I love the creation part. It's the actual doing and marketing, all of it, that is like the worst part. Creating it, I love my ideas. I don't know if anyone else, but creating it, I wanted to ask you, what is your creative process like? How do you is it something that just comes to you, or do you think about it? Are you organized with it? What's your process?
Great question, MJ. I think if I was to codify my process or share what's up for me, I think it first comes from like it's an evolution of my own practice, right? Anything that I'm sharing is coming from my own investigation. So, like, yeah, yes, that feels like the start point. And then I might feel called. I'll meet somebody who just like happens to be looking for the same thing I am, or like it's again that divine alignment. And that's really what I'm teaching now is mud movement under divine direction. It's all about like opening up to the synchronicities of life and embracing again this whole wild ride of the yogic path, whether you call it yoga or whether you call it whatever you want to call it, the hero's journey. Like there's many ways to look at the thing, but we all doing a crazy wild ride. And so yeah, and then opening myself up, that power of the pause, breathing. Oh my God, just like breathing. And then putting pen to paper. And like there'll be this beautiful, maybe soupy idea in my mind, but then like how do I get it into something structured? Okay, well maybe it's a 5-hour workshop, maybe it's a 5-week series, maybe it's a 6-week training. And then I just try it. Like you said, it's an experiment. So I just say yes. And shoot, I put up a website and it says some things, and it may not be as clear as it could be. That's fine. It's like the first step. And then somehow I know that like maybe my website isn't the fanciest, but I can talk to 5 people. I can talk to 5 people that they'll find me and I'll find them and they'll want to do the thing and we'll do it together. And then just like you said, it's a creative, then it's a refining process of feedback and just experiencing myself in the process.
Mhm.
And then I'm refining and then you do it again.
It's like learning a dance, I think. It's like you start out and you have to do like your bar work and learn the fundamentals.
Yes.
And then you have to learn how to go across the floor.
Yes.
So, and
It's a
then
great analogy. I love this.
finally, you put the music on, you learn the steps, and you can do the thing. You can dance it. You can dance it with freedom. That's how I always feel like my creative process is. And once I have put it out there and danced with it and for people and given my workshops or whatever, then it's like, all right, this is a good like dance, it's more of like an orchestrated piece that I can have forever, and I can pull it out at any time. And it's not an easy process by any means, but I think it's a lot of yogis have so many wonderful ideas and they don't quite act on them because of that fear. And that's why.
Or we have so many ideas that we have no idea what to focus on.
Right, correct.
Another understanding,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I know that for myself. Like I read tarot now, and it's a good like divine communication tool for me. And I'm staring at the card right now, like 7 of Wands, which is like you have to also like defend yourself against yourself in the sense that you have so many creative possibilities. I mean, our possibilities are truly endless. I believe that. I know it. And like, okay, and if I'm gonna muster up the time, energy, and be able to put my bring something to manifestation, right? And we can have the idea, but then it's about bringing it into this manifested world. Then I need to focus. This is all yoga. We can use the yoga words or not, but like focus my attention and take it all away. Like take it all the way. And you can have that end goal-ish in mind without being attached to it. What does it look like to take the next right step?
Mhm.
So that we don't get overwhelmed with this, to look this way, or overwhelmed in the process. You literally breathe, do the next right step. And for me, that's been really helpful as a part of my creative process.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's very important. Whoever is listening to this, whatever your age, it doesn't matter if you're older or younger. Everyone is creative. I don't like it when people say, "Oh, I don't have a creative bone in my body." That's a lie.
It's just been asleep for a really long time. We gotta wake it up.
Yeah, it's a
You
lie.
know?
It's like you create something every day. You might be a mom and you create a lunch, or you create you
Yes.
create things all the time, every
I
waking.
love that.
But
Yes.
so so briefly, you talked about your mud,
Yes.
and then what are the other couple projects that you're working on right now?
Sure. Love that. So mud right now it's starting to go on the road, which I'm so excited about. So movement under divine direction, and there's these like really beautiful integrative workshops. So there is yoga asana where we get on the mat, and there's also time for discussion about this whole path of yoga or the hero's journey and like what's really going on here. So we can embrace it, right? Embrace life. And then also there's some free form movement, dare I call it dance, right? There's some free form movement where like we learn how to take the yoga off the mat and move it into our everyday when you're walking through the grocery store, when you're having a conversation with a loved one. Like how does the yoga play into that, and how can we use our body and movement and nervous system regulation to really like show up for our lives,
Mhm.
like show up, boldly and courageously and take aligned action. So very excited about that. Yes, have some things coming up in New York, in Colorado. I'm sure there will be a link somewhere, somehow, maybe even come to Florida one day.
Good. No, we will put all the links on where to find you and your website and all of that in the show notes, so people can find you if they're interested, and
Perfect.
follow you and hopefully take from you, right? Experience
So,
it.
yeah. Well, I love working with people. You talked about getting on stage and being with audiences. Like that's my joy. It really is about sharing. I think it's about sharing, and I really have shifted the language of like, okay, let me teach something. People whom the other thing I offer is teacher training, which people can take online. And it's really about the same process, being in your own practice,
Mhm.
learning from that practice, and then just sharing from your
Well,
journey. And that's what we're doing right now.
My company's called Share Yoga, so
It's all connected.
you don't have to sell me on sharing. That's what
You get it.
I get it. And it's just important to share everything with everyone, I think. Okay, so what do you find the most rewarding in your yoga career or your yoga practice? What right now is the most rewarding thing for you?
Yeah. What's most rewarding? I think, it's really the aha moments that happen in the programming, or when someone really feels seen. When somebody really feels seen, like something that I'm committed to is like everything is perfect, and showing up exactly how you are is like the only way to, I guess, move through whatever challenges we're working with. You know, um, Putting on a happy face isn't doesn't get us to the pure joy that's possible when we just are loving to ourselves the way that we are, if that makes sense. And I'm still working on that with myself. Don't get it twisted. We all working on it. And I love being in programs where like we get to be how we are and who we are and
Yeah.
see each other.
You said
So-
something earlier about pre-prescribed way of living,
Yeah.
which happens to many of us if we're in a certain environment or a family tradition or whatever it is. And it wasn't our choice. It was someone else's choice to say, oh, you have to believe this way, or you have to act this way, or you're expected to be in this career or no career or motherhood or whatever it is. And I think that's what's changing today with many people. It's that breaking free of that prescribed way, and they didn't really choose it. It's just their
Yeah.
environment. And you're an example of that. You're breaking out of whatever, didn't feel correct. And
Yeah.
we all know when it doesn't feel right. And
Yeah.
so that's great.
Thank
And
you.
what is your current favorite yoga pose, if you can get down to one?
I saw that on the list of questions. I was like, I don't know, what is my current favorite yoga
It's
pose?
really hard to. It's.
Well, I think it's Shavasana.
Great.
Like I was like, oh, I got Shavasana. I like to just lay.
Yeah.
I'll usually like move my body to some music in my house is like really my yoga practice now, and then like really finding these moments of rest and like
Yes.
integration, because I know for myself I can keep doing and doing, and if I don't give myself the time to sort of
Well,
process.
I've said this to other guests on this podcast that I used to be a type A person, dancing, moving, and now I'm like a B minus. So Shavasana is the best three
So your
steps.
favorite pose is Shavasana too?
No, right now, actually, my favorite pose is Ardha Chandrasana, half moon. Is my pose right now.
I love that.
And as my body's aging and things, I have to really focus on hip and leg strength a lot. I want to keep my strength going. And I feel like the balancing poses for me at this time are the most challenging and the most wobbly, but the most rewarding. I like challenge. I
Yeah.
just like
Amen.
to be challenged. So right now, I'll always love Shavasana. There's no question about that. But right now, it's a half moon pose for me, and it's very expansive. But you have to be completely grounded and committed and steadfast to expand. That's how I feel about my half moon today. So
That's how I feel about my life.
yeah.
Like stability to.
Well, that's how we take yoga off the mat, everybody. We do a pose and we feel these energies or these vibrations or these mental fluctuations, and then we learn from them. That's the simple, I think, the simple explanation of yoga. So you are one of the younger guests that I've had on my podcast. You're not quite 40. But how do you feel today about moving towards your almost, midlife? They say 40 is midlife. How do you feel about moving towards midlife?
Thank you for asking this
You're all
question.
smiles.
Well, I'm excited. I almost feel like guilty saying that, but I'm not. Like I feel so excited. And I'll tell you why, a little personal bit here, and I know I shared it with you. I'm moving through a conscious uncoupling. I never did get married, but this feels like the closest thing to a divorce in my life. We had moved to Syracuse together. He's moving through a residency process to become a doctor. And again, all that old conditioning. Oh, good, you're going to marry a doctor. You'll be set for life. And like this idea that like, oh, you could just do yoga on the side and then he'll take care of you. I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want that. And so I'm getting a little teary-eyed, but I'm getting courageous. Like I'm super, I'm proud of myself for taking the right steps for me. And I am just in awe of the opportunities that are coming my way now that I'm saying yes to myself.
Mhm. Well, I can feel your heart ache about, because it's not easy to move away from something that made your heart full at one point. And it is a very you're going through a loss, but this loss is moving you towards what you want. And thank you for sharing that and for being vulnerable about that. And I'm glad you said you're excited about midlife. I don't like it when people complain about aging. I'm like, it's a gift. You woke up, you got two good legs, you got two good arms, you got breath in your lungs. You like, I'm like, why do people start complaining about aging? I don't understand it. Yes, there's aches and pains. Yes,
Yeah.
of course. And especially as dancers, oh my God, I've used my body my entire life and will continue to use my body. And I thank my body. I don't care if it's a little gooey here or less strong here or whatever. I haven't asked it to do anything. It's done so much for me. So I'm glad that you said that. I'm glad you have the attitude moving forward of excitement, even though right now it's a little difficult, or a lot difficult. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so last question. I asked this and I didn't ask, this is like the surprise question. It's no big deal. So usually the question is, knowing all you know up to this point in your life and all your experiences, the question usually is, what would you want to tell your younger self? But I like to rephrase the question and say, knowing all you've known, all you've experienced, and all of the knowledge that you've gathered, what do you want to tell your future self?
Ooh. Ooh. MJ, I like it. What do I want to tell my future self? I mean, I feel like, okay, I'm gonna diverge a little bit, because I'm really learning that like time is a little bit more malleable than I think we think it is, right? Time being linear. And so I feel like I have a connection with my future self. We're merged. Like it's only now, actually, MJ. I actually have no freaking idea, because today is a gift and I don't know, like none of us know how long we have on this beautiful earth, and I trust that it's a cyclical adventure and I'll come back and we'll probably do this thing again. And the time is only now. So like, I feel like I am my future self. Like that's the only way I can live right now, is like, if I'm going to tell me anything, it's like, good job, good fucking job. Like, good job. You're on the path. You are here. And,
That's great. That's
yeah.
great.
How
That's,
do you?
it's a surprise question. There's no right or wrong answers. It's just, I like to hear what people's reaction is to that. And I like to live by that too. Like, yes, I'm so proud of myself. And it's hard being your own cheerleader. It's very difficult. And I know other people love me and are proud of me and blah, 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 but it doesn't matter. It matters what we feel. And so I really appreciate your heartfelt answers and sharing all that you've shared with us today on the podcast, Danielle. And again, I wish you nothing but the best. And thank you for sharing your time. And again, all of her links will be in the show notes, so you'll be able to follow and get in touch with Danielle. So Danielle, namaste, and thank you again so much.
Namaste, MJ. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. For more youthful and healthy information, subscribe on my website, shareyogawithmj.offeringtree.com, and receive my monthly newsletters. Or if you know how to navigate social media, find me on Facebook /Mary Jane Waddell. That's Jane with a Y, Jayne, and Instagram at Mary Jane Waddell. Remember, Jane with a Y. This podcast would not be possible without the help of my editor, Dan Jones from Cocoa Beach Productions. You can find Dan at cocoabeachweb.com. And of course, thanks to my generous guests who share their time and youthful wisdom. Remember, the Youthful Older Yogi podcast is presented solely for educational, inspirational, and entertainment purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for a physician or other qualified professionals. Okay, yogis, stay well, stay youthful, and keep sharing yoga.